Well, welcome to this Labour Party conference event. My name is Benjamin Barnard, and I'm Head of Technology Policy here at Policy Exchange. It's a great pleasure to be here in Brighton. And today we're going to be discussing tech for growth, transforming the UK's digital and data infrastructure for the post-pandemic world. Now, we have a fantastic lineup here today. Not least of all, we are joined by Chion Wuru, who's the Shadow Minister for Science, Research and Digital. She is somewhat of a rare beast in Westminster in that she actually knows what she's talking about when she's discussing her shadow ministerial portfolio. So not only is she chair of the all-party parliamentary group on Africa, Angola, creative diversity, inclusion in science, technology, engineering and maths, she's also vice chairman of the all-party parliamentary groups relating to internet, communications, technology, space, open banking and payments. And before this, she gained a degree in electrical engineering at Imperial College, and she's got a very, very long background in telecoms, technology and IT. We're also delighted to be joined by Brian Glick, who's the editor-in-chief of Computer Weekly. For those of us who are interested in technology policy, Computer Weekly is the starting point of any single policy discussion. Their coverage of the UK tech sector is fantastic, and it's the largest IT magazine in Britain. We're also joined by Dee Denham, who works in the public policy for a very, very small search engine called Google. Dee has nearly a decade of experience in this sector and is a wonderful addition to the panel. And finally, we're also joined by Paddy McGuinness, who's currently a senior advisor at Brunswick Group. But before this, he was the UK's Deputy National Security Advisor for Intelligence, Security and Resilience, where he advised successive prime ministers on national resilience and crisis response and all hazards and threats relating from everything from cybersecurity to the national security aspects of foreign investment. So we have every aspect of this debate covered. With that, I will turn first to Chi to tell us about how she thinks the UK's sort of technology, the potential of it, but most importantly, what Labour's vision for digital really is.
Well, thank you very much, Benjamin, and thank you for that brilliant introduction. And can I just say that this is a fantastic panel, actually. It's great to be joined by people with such great expertise on a subject which is so important and which tends not to benefit from well-informed, broad debate. And I just want to start by saying that I'm a tech evangelist. I believe technology can change lives for the better, and also it already has. You're seeing families separated by oceans are now only a video call away. I like to say that tech is the most caring profession, because what is more caring than bringing people together or delivering healthcare to those? And the events of the last year have moved technology even closer to the heart of our working and domestic lives. And the average UK adult now spends a quarter of their waking life on the internet. And in 2021, we are all digital citizens. And that means that the challenge, or the opportunity actually, the opportunity of growth through tech and our data and digital infrastructure is so important. But I also say, as a constituency MP, that people are feeling more, rather than being empowered by the potential of technology, as I've just talked about, too many people see it as an erosion of rights and well-being. And that's one of the reasons why in the Labour Party we held a consultation, our digital future, over last year, the summer and autumn, to engage with tech experts, civil society entrepreneurs, trade unions, our constituents, NGOs, everybody in this area, to explore the UK's digital future and how we can counter digital threats and dangers, and particularly, and I think this is Labour's vision, or sort of Labour, where it reflects the Labour values, how can we hand citizens control over their digital lives? And we want empowered citizens who don't merely have access to the internet, though that's very important, but who are equipped with the skills and tools to make the most of that technology, and who are at the same time protected from those who can use it to cause harm. So we want people in charge of their own data, in control of their digital lives. And we believe that data can be used for public good. So we're not anti-data and we're not anti-big data. but we have to have the investment in the data infrastructure and in the skills, that we can take on this opportunity to use data for public service provision, making public services more personal, more efficient, more effective, and putting people able to co-create, as the term is, their own public services. But, and so there's a but, to achieve this, we are some way from achieving this now. So I could talk about this for a long time. I'm just going to quickly say, to achieve it, we need a robust regulatory framework. This government has been, Conservative governments have been in power for about 4 technological ages, and we have yet to see a regulatory framework. We need a framework that enhances individual and national security and protects everybody online now and in the future, as well as empowering innovation. So our vision for the future includes innovation for everybody, and it must also be sustainable. These are a lot of requirements, but yeah, I would say the UK and Europe, and particularly the Northeast, let me say, led the first industrial revolution. And by being at the forefront of the 4th industrial green revolution, we can create economic opportunity for all our regions and nations, whilst ensuring that it's sustainable as well. So every region in the UK needs to have the tools to start, scale, and invest in world-leading digital firms of tomorrow. And that's one of the reasons why Labour has put in place the proposals to support 100,000 new startups. Oh, sorry. Turn my digital connectivity off for a moment. But so it's a lack. We haven't had an industrial strategy. We don't have an industrial strategy. That hampers our ability to benefit from these opportunities. But also, I think our digital infrastructure has been so neglected. We've had, if not quite a wasted 10 years, and very close. We've had promises for full fibre from the Prime Minister, then watered down to gigabit for broadband for everybody, and now I think it's 85%, but we're not actually going to spend the money to make that happen. So we need long-term, I'll just finish on this, we need long-term sustainable planning for public expenditure on digital infrastructure, which promotes competition. We need the skills training in place, and that's skills both for citizens and consumers and for businesses critically, which we haven't got. We haven't got the business support for that. And we need a long-term plan for, funding plan for science, which drives science research and innovation through to realise the digital economy and the public services that we need.
Oh, well, brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, it's inspiring and sort of music to the ears of everyone here at Policy Exchange. I can tell you, we love ambition, and I personally think that there is no shortage of it from the Labour Party at the moment. But I thought I'd turn to Brian next, just to ask you, how you, as somebody who's been in the industry for quite a long time, seen successive governments happen, lots of technological change, what you thought the sort of UK's broad strategy was when it comes to science and technology, perhaps some of the areas of strength, some of the areas of weaknesses, and what you think we should be doing in the future to try and get the most out of a digital transformation of the whole of society.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Benjamin. And great to hear everything you're talking about there, Chi. Obviously, it's always positive for me to hear any politician of any hue talking positively about digital and the potential for it, and being cognizant of the potential concerns around it as well, which is obviously just as important. Now, when I was preparing for coming on here today, I went back and read through a number of articles I've written about government policy and digital economy over the last few years and that sort of thing, just to try and get some ideas about things to say. And I came across an article that I wrote some time ago now, and I just thought, if you don't mind, I'd just read out a few little excerpts for that, because I thought it illustrated the point that I wanted to make in answer to your question, Benjamin.
Of course.
It's just some of the excerpts for it. So in this article I said, let's say, for example, the government finds a way to incentivise employers to encourage more staff to regularly work from home. If, conservatively, 50% of employers can get just 20% of their office-based staff to work from home 2 days a week, that means 4% fewer commuters every week. That's potentially a 4% reduction in peak hour road traffic and train capacity straight away. It also frees up 4% of office space that can be converted into brownfield sites for new residential housing developments. It helps to ease the chronic housing shortage, especially for key workers, keeps house prices down, makes property affordable again for a younger generation, and avoids the sort of planning delays that are holding back property developments around the country. But those new home workers might not actually want to be confined to a room in their house for 2 days a week. They might still like to have other people around them. So what about developing some of the UK's libraries under pressure of closure from cash-strapped councils into community workplaces, equip them with Wi-Fi and broadband capacity, and they become a vital community facility? Put a creche and childcare facilities inside them too, and working parents get cost-effective childcare and better work-life balance. Maybe even use empty high street retail properties for similar sort of purposes. Now consider that argument again and imagine that 75% of employers can get 20% of staff to work at home twice a week. That's 6% fewer computers, 6% of office staff freed up. How about 40% of staff? That's 12% fewer commuters. And that's a serious economic and political opportunity. And none of that mentions the potential benefits to local community retailers who have all those home workers to feed and provide coffee for, or to pick up extra business when they have time to pop into town centre over lunch. Now, that was written in the context of wanting to encourage more spending on broadband infrastructure. But that was actually written in 2014. And I'm not trying to suggest I'm some sort of technology seer here. And as you can tell from the tone of that, they were still very much questioning whether or not employers would ever reach a point where they trusted significant proportions of their employees to be working from home. Now here we are, suddenly in 2021, employers are falling over themselves to come up with policies to allow their office-based workers to work from home. And the point I'm making is not specifically about remote working. It's about the opportunity that we have in this country to think differently about how we digitally transform at a societal level and not just at an individual policy level. So we've got, we've got lots of government technology and digital strategies now. We've got a national AI strategy, we've got a national data strategy, we've got a national digital strategy, we've got a national innovation strategy. And it's great that we've got all these things. I'm not criticising them. We can talk about the individual content of them, but it's good that we've got these things. But what they lack is a wider context of what we're trying to do as a country, as a government, to use the opportunities that technology gives us. We can see now, we've busted the myth that people are less productive working from home or can't be trusted to work from home. We've seen how technology can potentially transform it. To me, there are huge opportunities at a strategic, national, visionary level for how thinking about digitally transforming the society can bring huge social and economic benefits. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to interview the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, a couple of weeks ago, and I put at a very high level this sort of principle, this idea to him, and he said, "That's an interesting thesis," and then answered a very different question. Of course. But my challenge to Labour is the same. I think what we lack as a country is that sort of high level, real strategic vision of what digital and technology and data can do to actually solve a lot of really can solve a lot of the social problems and economic issues that we're facing today.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for Brian. I really think that whole vision of how tech really transforms everything is at the heart of what we do here at Policy Exchange. Everything really is becoming technology policy. And if you are studying energy policy, you need to know about the data-driven approaches to it. The same applies to basically every single area of research that we do. So, and I think that's captured really nicely in that comment. I'm going to turn next to Dee. And I thought, we're not really going to get here, though, are we, unless we have the infrastructure and the skills to deliver upon the promise of technology.
Absolutely, and it's great to hear Chi and Brian speak about, the kind of how we can develop the skills and knowledge base in the UK workforce to unlock this potential of tech and digital, and we really, as you said, need the infrastructure to employ it effectively. So Keir Starmer recently laid out his vision for the UK, in which a society was built on everyone's contribution. And he noted the importance of government working in partnership with the private sector to create good jobs and to really harness this potential of tech. And at Google, we definitely agree with that. We see partnership and openness and innovation is really critical to an inclusive and sustainable recovery. Now, we don't claim to have all the answers or solutions, but we definitely want to contribute our kind of expertise and capacity to be part of that answer, and ensure people are empowered to determine their own roles in the post-pandemic recovery. So when people ask us how tech can help drive this recovery, we generally recommend two things. So first off, help people and businesses get the skills they need for future jobs. And secondly, to invest more in the technology infrastructure. So at Google, one of the ways we're investing in the internet's infrastructure here in the UK is with a subsea fibre cable, the Grace Hopper, so named after, Chi, you might recognise the name, named after a Navy Rear Admiral and one of the first female computer scientists. And this will carry traffic, securely between the US and the UK. It'll give British users access to Google services, but also kind of computer and cloud resource with reduced latency. And so another way we were thinking about how we could kind of improve access to cloud resource through partnership is through something like a national research cloud. So this could be kind of part of a vision of Britain as a global internet infrastructure leader. And so a national research cloud would provide academic and non-profit researchers with the computing power and government data sets that are really needed for education and research, and enable access to the highest quality computer resources in the UK. Currently some of the best computing power is limited to a few private companies or universities, but by building this kind of national partnership of companies like Google alongside government universities, we could really open up this access across the country. But as Chi and Brian have both said, in order to take advantage of this computing power, we really need to ensure people are equipped with the right digital skills. And so, we want to be part of this evolving ecosystem of learning, and again, use our kind of infrastructure and expertise to help people take advantage of this technology. So some of the work we've done in this space, we recently launched Google Career Certificates, which will deliver scholarships for 9,000 job seekers. And so this helps equip learners with kind of theoretical and practical knowledge for in-demand entry-level jobs. So things like IT support, project management, UX design, data analytics. And you also referenced the importance of equipping businesses with these digital skills as well as the individuals. So we've committed to supporting 1 million British businesses through our Grow with Google programs by the end of the year to ensure they have the right digital skills. And this includes things like 10,000 hours of mentoring and training 100,000 people since the start of the pandemic. So yeah, playing our part as Google in this space is a future challenge we've set ourselves, and we really look forward to working with the Labour Party, policymakers and civil society and industry to meet that commitment.
Well, brilliant, thank you, Didi. And I can tell you, I looked at some of the sort of training material you've prepared for people online, and it really is fantastic, even for those of us who consider ourselves slightly more advanced on the sort of technological end of the spectrum. I'm going to turn now to Paddy, who I hope can hear me. Can you hear me, Paddy? Yes, you can, I hope.
I can.
So at the heart of all of this, Paddy, sits resilience. Unless we are resilient in our cyber and digital infrastructure, really we can't, go about any of the transformation of tech for our society. As former national security advisor yourself, how would you think we should go about this? And more importantly, how do you think we should go about questions relating to foreign direct investment in some of our key strategic technology companies? Oh?
Oh, no.
Proof that
Freeze.
the
Yeah.
UK's digital and data infrastructure...
That's how resilient we are. Yeah.
It seemed to be working.
It was working. It was.
I'm afraid,
Maybe
Paddy, we might come back to you. I'm going to turn instead to Chi. You want to say something more, I think you said earlier, about...
It was working.
Oh, we can hear you.
Now?
Let's turn to Chi for the meantime. You said earlier that you wanted to speak slightly more about the UK's digital and data infrastructure rollout. Obviously, the government have moved the goalposts on this a couple of times. I just wondered sort of where you saw that that's coming and what a future Labour government would do to try and sort of change the way in which we can speed that up. And also, potentially, if you have time, something about the upcoming online safety bill. Obviously, this is at the forefront of everybody in our minds. You've spoken before about the role of Ofcom in that, and I just wondered whether you sort of wanted to, if you wanted to.
You've given me far too much there, Benjamin.
I'm sorry, I
could
do
speak about this for half an hour,
apologise. I do apologise.
Because I worked for Ofcom for 6 years before coming into Parliament, and in terms of the government's rollout, one of my concerns, just as it was the first an MP in 2010 was that the government seemed to be hell-bent on remonopolising. A Tory government was hell-bent on remonopolising our digital infrastructure, which had actually become very competitive under Labour with what was called local loop unbundling. Fast forward sort of 10 years and we're in almost exactly the same position. We have effectively a monopoly provider of broadband, and we have the ambition was full fibre from the Prime Minister in 2019, and then it was reduced to 100% gigabit infrastructure by 2025. Then it was reduced to 85% gigabit by 2025. Labour's position is quite clearly that broadband is an essential utility. It is like electricity. It's like gas. Let's not talk about gas now. But we absolutely have to have. Everyone has to be able to access broadband. And indeed, the government's put aside £5 billion for that, which I think which each thing so if you ask what we would do, they're only planning to spend a fifth of the money they say they've put aside over the next 5 years. So what we would do is bring forward the money that's been promised, and in order to deliver on the broadband infrastructure that we need. And can I just say something? I'll say something very briefly about the online safety bill. Again, the government have been in power now through the digitalization of our world. Technology has sort of, become at the heart of everybody's experience, and yet we've had no regulation on online safety. No forward-looking regulation. I work for a regulator. You can actually, technology moves fast, but you can look forward, and these harms that harms such as, the online hate, racism, grooming, etc., unfortunately, they have been with us for many years now. What we need to do, as well as making the online safety bill fit for purpose, and this is somewhere where Didi and I probably will disagree, though I agree with a lot of what you said, on skills. We need to make that fit for purpose, but we also need to be looking forward to the harms from, as well as the opportunities, but we will only realise the opportunities of algorithms and artificial intelligence if we give people confidence in them by having a forward-looking regulatory framework which reflects, enhances and delivers on people's rights in a digital era. So I want the power of algorithms to make my constituents' lives better, but I also think they need it to be regulated if that is to be the case. Is that enough? I could go on.
Perfect. Well, we love long contributions here at Policy Exchange. And I say that as somebody myself who is famous, of course, for sort of speaking quickly and getting everything through done. Paddy, we're going to try again. National resilience. How can we ensure that we are resilient and that we are fit for purpose in a modern and changing world? Obviously, science and technology is one of the 4 pillars of the UK's integrated review of security, defence and foreign policy. Nobody's better to speak on this, I think, than you are.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Absolutely,
great.
perfectly. Thank you.
So listen, I'm really sorry not to be with you. I had an eye operation on Friday, and I'm seeing double that it wouldn't have been safe to travel. But it means the panel's really big when I look at it on my screen, because you're twice as many as you should be. Look, I'm a little bit schizophrenic on this, because since leaving government, I've been advising listed companies, including telecommunications providers, on a commercial basis. And I myself am a founder of a digital healthcare business and some cybersecurity businesses. And so I'm kind of seeing all sides of it in some way. I just want to emphasize a couple of points that have already been made, because it seems to me, before we talk about resilience, we need to recognize the reality of what we're dealing with. So first of all, I think Brian made the really powerful point that there are a plethora of strategies and policies and indeed bills and acts that are with us now in the UK. And when we hold the mirror up to them, we must look at the adequacy of them individually, but also the coherence of the approach. Because, as I think it was Chi said, you've vanished from my screen. Am I still there?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, great, okay. As she said, this is, oh, maybe it was Brian, now the digital aspect runs through everything we do. It's very hard to find a business or an activity that does not have a digital aspect. And therefore, we've got to shift from thinking about it as we do at the moment as being somehow a consumer activity, and then there's other things we do, and understand that actually it runs through everything, which means having a coherent approach to our various strategies and initiatives is critical to enabling all of those other activities, whether that be, greater efficiency and effectiveness in the National Health Service, meeting our COP26 obligations, where we're going to depend so much on technology, etc., etc. So when I look at this, I want to shift the discussion from being something that we have a whole conversation that we do digital at the end of it and actually run it orthogonally across the whole thing. And we always ask the question, what is the digital aspect of this and where is the digital resilience within this? Because if we don't do that, we are going to come up short. Now, the resilient challenge feels to me to be really acute. The United Kingdom has done some really good things, and I say that because I was a civil servant at the time doing them, so I feel very proud of them. But things like the National Cyber Security Centre, having a single national technical authority, having a degree of coherence in our national cyber strategy, etc., 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 trying to put in place the regulations and laws, even if we haven't quite achieved all we might have. So I'm quite proud of all of that, but I think we have to accept that isn't enough. That now, actually, the space in which we're operating, the digital space, is a contested space. And it's contested, yes, by nation states, and we know that, and that isn't just a matter of disinformation. I'd stress this very strongly. We have not seen weapons-grade cyber activity by a nation state. We have seen the lower end of the cyber lockup. So when we think about our national resilience, we've got to accept we haven't seen the real nature of the threat from nation states. And meanwhile, we are sinking under a pandemic of ransomware and fraud. And frankly, we don't have a good enough operational or policy answer to it. And that's part of the discourse now. I note from my practice, the majority of ransomware cases do not become public. So people are not really aware of all the things that are going on. And I think that takes us to a really important place when we think about resilience, in that just as digital has to run across all of these activities, what's the digital aspect of this? We have to ask the question, how do we make this resilient? And that may be that we have to have additional constraint, additional spend. I mean, and one thinks of things like some of the things we're going to do as a result of COP26. I've been doing some work on electric vehicle charging. Really interesting to ask the question of what would it be like if our electronic vehicle charging network became subject to either a ransomware attack like the Colonial Pipeline attack, or indeed was targeted by a nation state. Because in a few years' time, we're going to be dependent on it. We're not going to go to the petrol stations. There won't be queues at petrol stations. It'll be that's driving us. Thinking now, future-proofing, the technologies initiatives we have which are digitally dependent. Finally, I just want to say something quickly on skills, just to get it in, not least to prompt some thinking. So I've been involved in skills work, in government and since coming out of government. I note with private equity firms I work with, if someone comes and presents a business where the success of that business is posited upon building a skilled workforce, we normally don't engage. We don't invest, because building that workforce is so difficult at the moment in the UK market. And so there's something for me, two things strike me. The first one is the skills issue around digital, both the population issue that she's quite rightly raised, and more broadly, the question of where you get your skilled workforce to be a digital business. That's a matter for the Department for Education, just as STEM was a matter for the Department of Education. And there has not been an administration that successfully harnessed the very large education spend in the UK to make that shift. In other countries, Estonia, Israel, they have. And then the other one I'd say is, I think you apply digital skills to almost every new spend you make on staff. Personally, I'm appalled by the obsession with policing numbers, 72,000, we must have more. Because what they're doing is, on the whole, is they're being trained in old skills when the majority of significant proportion of the crimes that are being committed now are digital crimes, and they are affecting often the most vulnerable in society, and we don't have a police service that is trained or skilled to do that. So there's something really interesting from my mind about when you think about spending on a new person working in a sector, is there a digital aspect to the way in which they're developed? And it may mean you have fewer, but they're more effective, given that so much activity is now in the digital space. Sorry, I've thrown a lot at the wall there, but I was worried I'd go offline again and you wouldn't hear more from.
Brilliant, Paddy. Thank you so much, and I do hope you sound like you're in fine fettle despite your operation last week. There's nothing sort of has affected your grasp of this subject, we can tell. Brian, I thought I'd come back to you, having heard all that from Paddy, just for a little bit of a reaction. And also, given that you are probably the leading expert in the travails of the government digital service and the multiple different attempts to digitally transform Whitehall, I thought I might be so cheeky as to ask you how you thought that was going at the moment. But start by reacting to Paddy before I get accused of sort of, stoking the fire too much.
Yeah. I think one of the things that that came out for me from what Paddy was saying, and I think is coming out from Chi and Deirdre as well, is if you go to a major corporation now and talk to their top people and say, do you have a digital strategy, then most of them, I think, now will say, no, we don't have a digital strategy. We have a business strategy that includes digital. And I think there is a major, we need a major shift in thinking about digital, very much along the lines of what Paddy was saying, is that it is underpinning everything. It is absolutely underpinning everything. I don't know. I'd love to know how all the petrol distribution companies at the moment might use digital technology to optimise for route optimisation and supply optimisation, this sort of thing. If they're not, why aren't they doing that? And what are the sort of benefits we can get from those sort of things? I think Deirdre's comments in particular around skills. When I talk to people working in IT, both the tech vendors and people working in IT departments at major companies, and say, what's your biggest problem? Skills. Always skills. They can't. There's not enough young people with the requisite skills coming out of the education system, and there's not enough mature workers who have been able to transform their skills in order to have the skills that they need. They need for today. So I think these things underpin everything. I think in terms of how that feeds into how government itself is doing with digital and the government digital services, as you mentioned about. I interviewed Tom Reed, who's the new chief executive of GDS, not long after, a couple of months or so after he started. I like Tom. He's a bright guy. He absolutely knows what he's talking about. But with the absolute greatest respect to him, the sort of answers I was getting for him was exactly the same as I had from his predecessor 3 years. We started 3 years before, and exactly the same as I had from his predecessor, 5 years before that. I think that the people at the top of trying to deliver digital government, within the civil service, they know what they want to do, but it just doesn't quite happen somehow. Now, sometimes it's because people do make mistakes and they spend a lot of money on projects that end up not working or too ambitious for one reason or another. But there is absolutely a huge opportunity, and Chi sort of alluded to this when you were talking about how government is engaging with us as individuals, as consumers and as citizens. There is such a huge opportunity to improve the way that we support people by offering them much better digital services. We've been talking for 10 years now about how can we cut costs, give better services by digitising this and digitising that, and improving the government website and improving all the different online services and this sort of thing. And some of them are better. A lot of them are better than they were, but there is still so much more we could do. And I still find that within government, a lot of that comes down just to the mindset that digital is this thing on the side. It's not infused throughout government thinking, throughout policy, throughout the way policies are set. I still don't see much evidence of there being a digital person around the table when policies are being set to say, well, did you know with digital we could do this instead? Wow, wouldn't that be a great policy?
Well, I think this is a good moment to plug a recent Policy Exchange publication.
I was not paid to do that.
But if you want to have a solution to some of these things, I strongly recommend that you check out Government Reimagined, which may or may not make some very similar points. I'm going to come back to Dee Dee. Skills is one of the big things that's coming out of this, and UK skills shortages. Obviously, you've spoken a little bit already about how Google are trying to tackle this. But are you experiencing those shortfalls yourself? What more could the government be doing to assist tech skills? And what are the sort of big questions that you've sort of come out from this panel, from the sort of perspective of industry as opposed to from policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, you know, we're focused, I spoke a bit about the kind of the career certificates and what we're focused on, you know, kind of coming out of COVID-19. And it is on balancing the kind of individual and businesses. And Brian, you mentioned kind of the importance of, you know, lifelong learning as well, right? So being used to kind of adapting and retraining, and that's a real focus for us as well. And also, you know, kind of never too young to start learning how to navigate the digital world too. So we have our kind of school programs, Be Internet Legends, which starts between 7 and 11, teaching people how to kind of navigate safely online. And because it's so important to us as a business, you know, it's been mentioned a couple of times here already, you know, people being confident, feeling safe online, you know, that's really integral to us, and making people sure people feel comfortable, and kind of in control of their experience. And so those are kind of some of the things that we're thinking about.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we have a very, very large online following at the moment. We're sending through lots and lots of questions. But if those in the audience would like to raise their hands, if they would like to ask a question, and in the meantime, I will ask some of the ones that we're getting from... Oh, actually, Paddy, would you like to contribute first?
I just wanted to broaden this out
quickly, Paddy. Yeah.
I just wanted to broaden this out by making a point about how we pull this through, following on from Brian. And I'm saying this as someone who's been in government and now tries to provide services to government with some of my startup and scale-up work. And what I'd note is there are some fundamental obstacles in the way for pulling through technology at the rate it is available in government because of the way in which government procures. And there's understandably a focus on good use of public money. But I'd note in other jurisdictions, for instance, in the United States, it seems that states and the federal government are better at pulling through technologies that improve efficiency and effectiveness faster than in the UK. And there's a great focus in the UK on established providers who tend to provide established solutions and often have sunk costs in legacy systems. And frankly, that doesn't lend itself. And then if I may, just to think a little bit about where you get your finance from if you're trying to grow a tech business. It's really interesting the way in which in the UK, there is not as much focus on the technology as the balance sheet. But classically, when I go and see funds in the US, they talk to me, yes, about how you're doing in the business and have you got the right business skills and leadership, but they also talk to me about the technology. Frankly, UK investment funds tend to focus on the balance sheet and invest really quite late. And it's not a surprise, therefore, that we see what some people call infanticide, that if you have a British startup or scale-up and it's a subdivision of something that can be integrated, you go and find a nice integrator, maybe you go and find Google, who buy you because you can't really get the kind of funding you need to grow in the UK because you're not either going to be large enough or mature enough to pick up that late-stage funding which British funders prefer. Final thought for you, I am really disturbed by the way that there's a bit of a Little Englander, or Little Britain, maybe that Little Britain isn't quite right, but Little Englander tendency at the moment that's coming about the way we're thinking about our technology companies, large and small in the UK, that somehow, oh, I don't know if we want foreign investment, we don't want foreign partners, we want to grow things here, if we do that, we will fail. There's tremendous opportunity across borders in growing and with large partners, large American tech, but large European and other tech. And at the moment, there's just a little bit of a set in Parliament. You can feel of people saying, no, we really want that to have a Union Jack on it. Not meaningful in the technology space.
That's an incredibly important contribution from Paddy. We obviously have a spending review coming up, which is a prime opportunity to do some Green Book reform and to change the way in which we relate spending rules to technology spends. I know it's something that is one of the big things holding back. What's also quite interesting, and be interesting to hear Chi's thoughts on this as well, the Chancellor of the Exchequer recently wrote to UK institutional investors like pension funds and accused them of overlooking investment in UK infrastructure and digital assets, and sort of the idea being that sort of foreign pension funds were the ones benefiting from UK digital advances. Be interesting to see how a Labour government would do similar things, maybe not, to try and attract kind of institutional investment and all the rest of it in. I don't know, this is a question for later. But in the meantime, I will just quickly ask some questions from the online chat. So the first question is, which is that when we're talking about work online from home, how can I prove my identity more easily, and how can we discuss UK digital infrastructure without discussing digital identity? Which it is a very, very important question. Another one is, how can we stop digital first from being exclusionary? I am still in a situation where I can't access my own home. And finally, what more can we do to tackle disinformation online? So I think those are three pretty good starter questions.
Have we got another hour?
Well, I would love to discuss this for another hour, as you know, but we might start with you, Brian, and then come across to sort of Chi, and then across to the other panels, if that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, huge questions, very, very big questions, are very difficult to answer them pithily in a couple of minutes. I mean, as anybody who's followed what I write in Computer Weekly will know, digital identity is for me a hugely important issue. It's something that could potentially unlock an enormous amount of opportunity, socially and economically. But it's hard. There's no doubt that it's a very hard thing to do and to do right, as we have seen in many examples of in the UK. And I think it's potentially at the heart of the second question I think that you read out there, Benjamin, around inclusiveness as well. Digital identity is at the heart of social inclusion and social inclusivity as well. The reason we're still not one of the reasons we're not very good at it in this country is just because it's hard. We do make it harder for ourselves, and again, this is a much bigger debate. We do make it harder for ourselves because culturally in the UK, the idea of a national identity card or a single digital identifier for each of us is considered pretty politically toxic. And if you look at most of the countries that are doing well with digital identity, it's quite often because they have a culture where identity cards and digital identifiers are considered completely normal, and that's a big step forward for them. The other, I think, challenge around digital identity is, I've never heard a single citizen consumer saying, "Oh, if only I had a digital identity." My life would be so much easier if I had a digital identity. It's a technology that people who understand it are trying to convince people why they want it. There is no latent demand for digital economy from individuals, no matter how much people like me or others with an interest in this area can see the potential benefit to those individuals from it.
Well, brilliant, thank you. I'm sorry I've thrown so much at the panel today. I feel incredibly guilty. But I mean, if there's anybody who can sort of tackle 6 different topics at once, it is the amazing Chion Wura. So I will turn to her. If I've put too much, I can only apologise.
I'm trying to get this into 5 sentences, okay? So including on pensions, I think that's a fascinating point about it, but let me just say, I'm glad Rishi Sunak is looking at this. But what we need in investing in innovation is long-term patent capital, and that is what this government has done absolutely nothing, if you like, to attract. And we need to, that's why when Keir and Ed Miliband talk about, we need to realign the incentives so that we have incentive for long-term patient capital, and that obviously is a part of the pension, what the pension funds represent. Now, should we ever get a digital minister, and I do hope that one is planned, because frankly, going into the Tory conference next week without having anyone who is responsible for digital will be an interesting representation of of their strengths. But should we ever get a digital minister? Digital identity is sort of one of the key areas, if you like, that has, I think, been missing. I mean, it's been Brian is an expert here, but I'm familiar with the issues around it and the failures, the multiple failures around Verify. And I'll say that Brian's right, it is complicated, but I will also say that there's an ideological issue here, which is that the government wanted to make it entirely private sector. And whilst we don't have people ringing up and saying, you know, I want a digital identity, it is important that that identity is available and can be supplied by government, because the government, if like, having it entirely a private sector issue requirement misses out those who are not, for whatever reason, maybe because they're excluded in other ways, not engaging in the digital world in that way. And I will just say on this, you know, there's a lot of discussion about how to have a about requiring digital identity online. Identity is a spectrum, and I think we definitely need to start by enabling everyone to have a digital identity. Yeah. You know, right now, it's not easy to get a digital identity. And then can I just finally talk about diversity, because we haven't mentioned that really. And you know, it's great to have an almost balanced panel. In fact, it is a balanced, it's a gender balanced panel. You know, I think it's in technology we have to bring in all our skills, all representing all our diverse population, because that's the only way we will have a resilient and sort of general, universal, if you like, digital powerhouse in this country. So I really, Google and I have differences on many issues, but I support the work that Google is doing to promote digital skills. But I do think it's a government responsibility as well. And I would say, you know, if it's not diverse by design, it will be unequal by outcome. And unfortunately, we are seeing that because we haven't done enough to make sure that technology, you know, I spent 20 years in the sector, we haven't done it, and we haven't made the progress we need to on that. And just finally, you know, technology isn't something that happens to us. Technology is something we shape, and we shape that through the policies that government makes, also through the culture that we have and through the priorities that we have. And I think we need to feel, you know, I would say that one of the challenges I have with this government's approach to technology is it's not about, it's like saving money or it's fixing a problem here, but it doesn't recognize the democratizing and enabling power of technology in public services, but also in the private sector as well. And until we recognize that, then we won't have the digital economy and the growth that we need.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Chi. I didn't even think you'd thought about these questions for quite a long time. Right, Didi, I think actually it's a really important thing to just chat about quickly is diversity in technology.
Yeah.
Obviously, Google has been a trailblazer on this front, but what more can we do as a society to include diversity and inclusion in technology?
Yeah, well, I think to pick up on that point, well, kind of on some of the questions that were raised as well, on in terms of exclusionary and how we can be more inclusive in that. And I think, well, like much of the conversation today, it goes back to the skills and equipping people with the right skills and capabilities that they need to navigate confidently online and feel empowered and included in that experience. And tech, as she mentioned, is an incredibly an incredible way of creating inclusion, people finding communities online, underrepresented groups. So, it can be a real force for good. But again, people need to feel kind of safe. And I think leading on from that and some of the work we do in schools is around kind of critical thinking, encouraging people to navigate safely online. And I know one of the questions was on disinformation and the work we can do to tackle that, which in the broad range. And so, I think for us that's important that again people feel empowered when they're online. But more fundamentally, what our kind of approach is obviously we work to remove violative content. But there's also we will reduce content that we deem borderline, and then try and raise up those authoritative voices as well. So obviously trying to empower and engage users to understand how they're navigating safely online, but also we're doing that work in the background too.
Brilliant. I'm just quickly going to turn to Paddy, and actually, if I could just take that sort of line about disinformation online. I mean, obviously, we're now seeing some very advanced cybersecurity threats to democracy with disinformation, and it's forming part of a kind of defence. Or you look a little bit quizzical about that. Brilliant. I mean, what can we do to ensure that we are on top of this, we prevent the spreading of propaganda online? But actually, where does that rank amongst national security concerns? And actually, is it as much a concern as people perhaps think it is?
Well, I don't think it's as much a concern as someone collapsing our electricity grid or, switching off our telecommunications or leaving us with no fuel. That feels to me, which is, frankly, what offensive cyber programs at military grade aim to do. I know I used to sponsor the British offensive cyber program, For a nation state, disinformation is messing about on the internet, on the World Wide Web. It's not the top end of what you're trying to do in cyberspace. I think there are a couple of things I'd say about disinformation. One is there are existing and emerging technologies, and I could name some companies, including some I help, who can map out what is actually happening online, and both in a governmental and a corporate space, and personally, it's possible to understand what is misinformation and who the actor is and what tactics they're using. So that's one thing, and I think we need to hold up, light to light and show actors and show the use of techniques that nation states and others are using. But more importantly, we've got to be confident about ourselves and our democratic processes. People have always misled us during electoral cycles. Previous didn't do it online. If we conclude that somehow there's something about the online interaction that turns us into zombies that take direction, then I'm afraid to say democracy's finished. I don't believe that for a moment. I think we grossly overstate the significance of, in the democratic process, misinformation, disinformation online, and we need to be a little bit more confident in response to it, because at the moment I think we're overreacting to it in the context of the democratic process. That'd be my view.
Brilliant. That is a fantastic contribution, Paddy. Thank you so much for that, because it's always very, very important to keep things into perspective. And on that, I'm going to quickly turn to Chi, who I think wanted to come back quickly on some of the things.
Very quickly, because I have to leave. But I want to just to say, I think disinformation online is really important, and I think when I have constituents or others who are looking for protection from COVID, from horse medicines and all, the difference with, I think it's really important to understand the difference between disinformation in a technical age and disinformation when it was by word of mouth or by pamphlets or whatever. And it's the industrialization of that disinformation can be very significant. And I think the online tech platforms have a duty to prevent their platforms being used to industrialize disinformation because of the harm that it does. And the other thing I would just say is actually to come back somewhat on what Paddy said before about a little Englander mentality amongst politicians. I've done 3 bills this year about telecoms infrastructure because of the lack of resilience and because of the lack of any UK or indeed allied providers when it comes to 5G and infrastructure. And I do think it's important to recognize that we do need to have capability amongst our allies, which reflects our national security interests. And I don't think that should be confused with a sort of little Englander mentality. I think that's about ensuring that we have a secure and resilient economy to go forward and be outward looking, and so that everyone can benefit from the digital transformation that I look forward to.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chi. And I think it's been a fantastic panel. We've got one very quick question, if you'd like. Brilliant. It's been a fantastic panel, and I think it's been a really, really, really kind of you to come here. If I may say so, I've done lots and lots of tech panels over the years, but this I think has been one of the most exciting, one of the most interesting, and one of the best informed. So if I may thank Paddy for his fantastic contribution, Deirdre, Chi, and Brian. It's been a fantastic event. Thank you for watching online, and thank you for coming in the conference hall.
We should catch up sometime.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, it'd be nice. Yeah.
That's good.